It's that time to do my winter weather verification. This year will include the complete score for my mountain snowfall as it is now past April 1st and I can verify that. So I'll be going through all 7 predictions that I made and giving myself a grade on each one of them and how good I did for my winter weather forecast in both October and December. Precipitation in October, I predicted between 31 and 39 inches for the water year, with the winter months being between 13 and a half and 16 inches. And in December, I predicted anywhere from 33 to 41 inches, with the winter months being between 14 and 17 inches. What actually ended up happening is that we're currently at 119% of average for the water year so far, approaching 33 inches. And the winter months of December through February, it got to 22 and a half inches almost. So as a result, partial mist is guaranteed for winter precipitation. And while the water year totals are to be determined, they do lean misses at this time. I am still going to call that a to be determined for the water year totals just because it's not uncommon in El Nino years for spring, especially the latter half of spring, to be relatively drier than normal. So you might have an early shut off to the faucet later on. Average temperature departures for October, it was within 1.5 degrees of average for my forecast, but in December I upped this to 0 to 3 degrees above average. The actual temperature departure in Portland was at 1.7 degrees above average. This did tend to increase the further south you went, and that's just because the cold snap/Arctic blast of January wasn't as potent the further away you got from Portland in terms of the lowest temperatures. And it didn't last as long because you weren't as close to the gorge outflow that you didn't really take advantage of the second wind that occurred after the transition event. So as a result, it was a miss in October and a hit in December. Lowest temperature, I predicted above 20 degrees for the lowest temperature, and the exact opposite happened. Not only did the lowest temperature get below 20 degrees, the lowest high temperature got below 20 degrees for the first time since 1990, with the lowest daytime high being 19 degrees. It's going in the record books, though, as 21 because that occurred at midnight. So just having that in as a disclaimer. That's a clear forecast miss, though. Peak wind gust. Predictions in October and December, I both didn't predict anything special in terms of the strength of a windstorm, with it being 45 to 55 miles per hour in October. In December, predicting anything less than 49 miles per hour. The actual peak wind gust was 47 miles per hour, and this did not occur during the east windstorm during said Arctic blast that caused a lot of damage. This actually happened during the March 9th more localized event that only hits random areas, seemingly speaking at least, and cause more sporadic damage. I'll go into excuse me, why that occurred later on this video when I go over the main events this winter. This was a forecast hit though for both predictions. Most active time in October, I forecasted the most active time to be in December, and when I updated the forecast in early December, I changed this to December 25th through January 25th and March 1st through March 10th, which is one of the best changes I have done from an October to a December forecast because this occurred pretty well. January 9th through the 20th was most of the wintertime weather, with March 1st through March 10th having a little bit of a comeback. And essentially every significant event had fallen in this time period. Next slide has all the details. This does mean October, it was a forecast miss, but in December, it was a forecast hit. So the main events, January 9th had the Clark County snow event, kind of the prelude to that Arctic blast. And on January 13th through 17th, major lowland Arctic blast with a sleet storm at PDX and ice storm down south in Eugene, and mix between ice and sleet anywhere in between on the 13th. 17th was an ice storm valley wide and a major east windstorm in terms of damages. The gusts weren't that extreme, however, because the ground became frozen and because the low temperatures caused the trees to get a little bit more brittle than they otherwise would, it caused more power outages than it otherwise would, and therefore more damage than it otherwise would have. Because the peak wind gust during this time period was 46 miles per hour. So if the wind was coming from the south, that's generally not a super damaging windstorm, but because it came out of the east and during an Arctic blast, that's what caused all the damage. Now, after the 17th, localized areas in East Portland metro area did see another small freezing rain event and a resurgence of the east wind, but the rest of the valley didn't see much. March 1st through the 3rd saw a wider or hill snowfall with occasional accumulations in Eugene and Corvallis that were both less than half an inch per day. And on March 9th, there was a localized wind event just randomly throughout generally northern portions of the Willamette Valley with gusts of up of 47 miles per hour being reported at PDX. Now, the Mount Hood April 1st snow depth. Prediction in October, I said between 60 and 110% of normal with more the higher you go. And in December, I lower this by 10% on each side between 50 and 100% of normal with more the higher you go. And it was difficult to determine if this was a forecast hit or forecast miss, because while the basin wide average is about 85% or so, the Mount Hood test site was right in that middle at 84%, and I did notice a general trend that the further north you go, the less snowfall there was and the lower the snow depth is. And there is more in the south in regards to the lower elevations especially. Mount Hood was the dividing line, which for my purposes is like, that's kind of too close to call. And considering the basin average was within my margin of error for the lower elevation, albeit on the high end, I decided to call this a forecast hit. And then lastly, valley snowfall. In October, I predicted the northern Willamette Valley to have 0 to 3 inches and the southern Willamette Valley between 1 and 5 inches. And in December, I just updated this to a 0 to 3 inches for the entire Willamette Valley. The best estimate in the South Valley did stay higher, though, than the North Valley. So, as usual, I do a population-weighted average. So, let's look at what happened. So, the two official sites are at the Portland National Weather Service office and in Eugene. PDX had 1.6 inches of snowfall at the National Weather Service office, and in Eugene at the airport there was 1.4 inches recorded, and for selected locations throughout the Willamette Valley and Southwest Washington, they are on the screen here. All these are courtesy of NOAA's climate data online and those stations there, with the exception of Sherwood, which I personally measured. So the population weighted average came out to be 2.69 inches, which caused both October and December to be a forecast hit. Now, this is my actual snow or scorecard for this past winter. So all in all, October was a pretty rough forecast with me in getting what looks to be 3 out of 7 correct. In December, I did make a pretty good improvement, improving that to a 5 out of 7. And it's possible if we have a dry spring, rest of spring, summer, and September, because the water year ends on September 30th, that this water year prediction ends up being a partial hit, which would increase my score to a 5.5. So Otherwise, that is it for this video. Unlike previous years, I'm not including the way too early prediction in this video. It will come out at the same time though. It's just going to be a separate video because I'm doing it in a little bit more detail this year. So please watch that video if you're looking at what's going to be coming up next winter. And otherwise, stay safe out there and take care.